Craig here with my dear friend Margaret Kimberley. Hey, Margaret.
Hi there, how you doing?
Pretty good. I guess the last time we saw each other was actually in person. We had lunch on your birthday.
Yes, we did, back in August. One of my first forays out after 5 or 6 months of quarantine.
I know. It's funny because I didn't know I knew we were having lunch, of course, because I met you there. But I didn't realize it was your birthday till you told me so. So that was really sweet. And,
It was very nice. Thanks.
we actually go back, started doing these videos probably in 2015 or so.
Wow. Yes, we did. It was a while ago.
It was a while ago, and I know you're sort of you're the popular one now on the indie media circuit. But you and I started doing this a long time ago, and ended pretty much after 2016 at some point. It just I think, for me, it ended. I ended up getting, fairly sick, pretty sick. So, and I don't, I could blame the election, the politics, and blame a lot of different things. But whatever it was, it kind of took me off of this path for a while, and now kind of back here, talking with you again. And so the occasion is that you've got a book out this year, and I've got a book out this year.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about both of our books, why everybody should have them and read them and give them as holiday gifts.
Yes.
And not just because we're cool people who need your support and want your support, but because these are really, really great books. So Margaret's is, first of all, Margaret is also the senior editor at Black Agenda Report, which is a great indie news site, which everybody should go read. And I'll link to all these things in the video. This book is called Prejudential. It came out earlier this year, correct?
February, yes.
Yeah, February. Yeah, I mean, really just before COVID. I remember last year talking with you about it, and we certainly didn't know, it'd be out a month before COVID. But Prejudential is a great title, Black America and the Presidents. And it's always great when we have these books sort of, you don't want to say rewriting American history, but in some sense, it's clarifying American history. Mm-hmm. And you do this in order of all the presidents. And it's great. And it's such an easy read because you could jump in at any point. Mm-hmm. I'm going to jump in right here as an example in the chapter on John F. Kennedy, talking about the March on Washington. And this part here really caught my eye, so interesting. Mm-hmm. You say, Robert Kennedy expressed criticism from the very beginning, accusing King of wanting to embarrass his brother. On the eve of the march, he spoke to diplomat Marietta Tree, saying about Bayard Rustin's involvement, quote, "So you're down here for that old Black Fairies anti-Kennedy demonstration." When Tree attempted to change the subject to Martin Luther King, Kennedy interjected, "He's not a serious person. If the country knew what we knew about King's going on, he'd be finished." Now, there's a lot going on in there, first of all.
Yes, there is.
I think that not everybody's familiar with all the characters in that little narrative there, so maybe you could illuminate a little bit. But then also, the research that went into this, what did you need to do? Where'd you do the research? And to come up with this kind of narrative, which is so illuminating. And I think, it should be really in, all these history classes for kids to read these.
Yeah. Well, to answer your question about the King and the Kennedys, it's important to remember the Democratic Party was the party of the segregated South. And even when Democrats became president, they were always concerned about getting the support of Southerners. So that happened with FDR. People begged him for anti-lynching legislation. He would always say, "I can't do it. I need Southern support for legislation." And he would always beg off. Same with Truman. And then Kennedy comes along, and people forget, this is the early 60s. This is pre-civil rights legislation. He was still dependent on Democrats and did not want to be identified with, connected with this movement. His first meeting with King actually took place in secret, in private. There was no public announcement that he was meeting him. Bobby Kennedy was Attorney General, and he gave permission, J. Edgar Hoover permission to surveil King, to tap his phone. And that's probably what he was referring to when he said if people knew about him, whatever. Bobby Kennedy was his brother's, people say, hatchet man. I think that's a correct description. I think it's accurate. He did not like the idea of the March on Washington. He was concerned about what it would mean for his brother's chances for re-election. So that, I think, is what people need to remember about the Democratic Party and about the Kennedys in particular. As far as research, it was, some of it was, I did a lot of research online. You can get a lot of information online. There are books, if they are available electronically, you don't have to go to the library and read them. But there also comes a point when you do have to go to a library. You just have to sit in a stack. So I utilize the New York Public Library quite a bit. It's one of the advantages of living here, that you're in proximity to this great resource, the main research library on Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street. Also the Schomburg Center, another New York Public Library branch here in Harlem, Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. I also went to Washington, to the Library of Congress, anything I couldn't get in New York. I made trips to Washington for that information as well. So it was a learning process for me. I knew how to write. I didn't know how to write a book. How long
was the whole process for you?
It took about 3 years to write. Took longer. First of all, I had no idea. I said, I can do it in a year, having no idea what I was talking about. There were times I could not write. I had to take some months off. I'd say for the time I wasn't writing, I would say a year and a half to write, actually. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, publishing, if you're going through a publisher, that's another year and a half process. So when I turned in the manuscript until the date of publication, it was another 18 months. So yeah, it was a lot of work, especially for someone who did commentary. You do have to back up some of what you say if you quote someone or you claim something happened on a certain date, but it's another thing to make statements about a president and what they did or didn't do or did or didn't say. You've got to have your facts right. So it was a lot more work. It was, parts of it were fun. It's hard work. Writing is, it's a solitary thing, and you can't do it well unless you spend a lot of time by yourself. So that's kind of tough, but it was fun. I found, I would say half the things that I reveal in the book are things I knew before, and half were things that were new to me.
What surprised you the most?
What surprised me the most is the degree to which other scholars and historians have covered up history. The information I provide is not, it's not hard to find, really. I mean, it's not in some secret archive. If you research Abraham Lincoln, you find out very quickly he was determined to send Black people out of the country. These efforts at colonization, as it was called, were popular throughout the history of the United States, sending Black people away. But Lincoln had an office of colonization. He had an office dedicated to doing this. He tied emancipation to a colonization plan. He signed a colonization plan the day before he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And there was a short-lived colony in an island off the coast of Haiti. So it is an example of how much, frankly, we're lied to. Most people, I think and it's understandable, they write about people they admire and respect. So they don't reveal anything that puts them in a negative light. But if you're serious about writing history, you're supposed to be writing the truth. And I'm not the first. There are other books that were sources that people can see in the bibliography that I used. But it's something that bears repeating and has to be repeated over and over again, because presidents, and we're talking in the wake of the 2020 presidential election just a few days ago, although they're still counting. But presidents loom so large in history, and it's important to be truthful about them. And the history can't be written just by their admirers either. And when you do that, when you look at the presidents, then you're looking at the history of the country as a whole. And you're being honest about the country. And that's hard for people, for some people who, we all identify with the group or groups, and we want to feel good about them. So if you want to identify as an American, you don't want to hear a lot of this stuff. But nobody's going to die because they find out the truth about Lincoln. You can admire something else about him if you want to. You can admire other people. And that's another thing that I hope can begin, that people learn about people who should be considered heroes if only they were known. So as I have often said, if there's a white man from the 1800s you want to admire, it ought to be John Brown. So there are many people in history. That's why I think Howard Zinn, The People's History of the United States, is so important, that people learn more about the country and about people who made positive contributions. Yeah.
Well, this is certainly it's like a legacy piece. I think this is something that's going to last. Say for updating with future presidents.
I felt honored that you asked me to give a blurb for your book. It was no problem at all. I love the imagery. It really captures, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Your imagery really captures what the country has experienced this past year. And I would love to tell viewers what it is that I said about your book. Quote, "The failed state was fully revealed in 2020 as the nation experienced a pandemic, economic collapse, and mass protest. Craig Gordon beautifully captures the contradictions that came to life in a tumultuous year," unquote. And I think it's very important that this time be remembered and be recorded in a way that the corporate media and the pundits and the politicians, all the people we've spent time talking about, that we don't allow them to be the ones to define what we've gone through. That's why I think it's so important that a book like yours has been published.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the idea of, it's funny because when it first broke out in COVID and I was up in rural, where I am now, up in rural New York, and looking around and just thinking, I knew something was coming. I didn't know what it would look like. But when it came, it was like, oh, okay, this is where it's been heading. And, it is something that's been unfolding since Reagan in the modern era. And it's been, it's transcended parties. And that's why I think that some of it, some of it you see speaks to one side of the population, and some of it speaks to the other, and everybody's now being victimized the same way.
It's true, and it tells us how many of our problems are bipartisan, how so many interests are shared by the two parties, that people suffer all over the country. But it's important for people to see that. And that's the other thing I loved about your book. You didn't write just about the rural areas. You didn't write just about what was happening in New York City. You tied it all together. And I think that's extremely important for us to do at this time.
Yeah, the idea that that it transcends politics, that political that's party politics that we have doesn't serve the people's interest. I in my section about the city, and I wrote a little narrative, introduction to each area, being the country, the city, and then rebellion. And in the city, the whole really the conversation to me, and showing these pictures of empty New York, was the story of financialization. And how the growth of the financial services industry since the 80s has roughly doubled, and to the extent that the economy at one point, and maybe it was a small point during New Deal era, that it served the populace. Now we all work for the economy, work for the financial services industry.
Right.
And one of the things that I've been using image-wise for the past couple of years is these mannequins, to me, which illustrate exactly, we're all like these mannequins behind the glass of the store, but we're all kind of dressed up and we're kind of ready. And then I use the reflection, so you kind of see the world what the mannequin sees. But it's sort of like what we've become. We've all been commoditized. We've all just seen like everything's for sale and everybody's interests are for sale. And that's why it's normal for a thing like big food to exist, to sell people non-foods that make them sick, and but I mean, and here's another thing where people say, we trust the science and trust scientists. Sure, except when it's bought by industry, which is most of the time.
That's right. Yeah, well, science is not some impartial force. Science can work for all kinds of purposes. This year with Trump, it's like Trump is anti-science, so you're supposed to love Fauci. But Fauci lied too. He told us we didn't need masks, then he said he did. Science creates drugs that are unnecessary, that cost, even the ones that are necessary, cost too much. So science can do a great deal of damage. Science created nuclear weapons, so we can't act as though that is the issue. But I think it's especially, it just reminded me of something, with Trump, everything was blamed on him. It was as if everything was fine before Trump. Well, there were police killings before Trump. There was a society that had been made poorer and poorer by the financial services industry, as you point out. And it's very unfortunate that we see things through this lens of this bad man. Everything was good until the bad man came along, and all we need is for the bad man to be gone and everything will be okay. Well, a lot of things will I won't miss Trump for a multitude of reasons, but I'm not under any illusion that his disappearance from the scene, from the political scene, will mean that we have a better country. It will not. There's a lot wrong. There's a lot that people have to demand. I'm already hearing these people saying Biden has to heal the country. Well, that's such BS. That's just a platitude. Yeah. He's supposed to do what people want him to do, and people cannot be shy in their demands and have to demand everything that they want. We were talking briefly about the civil rights movement, which everybody fetishizes and uses for PR purposes. But what did those people do? They made demands. They were consistent. They made demands they knew politicians did not want to meet, but they made them anyway. And any success that came from it came from them. And that is what we have to remember, and not see these people in high political office as our saviors. We're going to have to be our own saviors. That's always been true, but it's especially true now.
Yeah, and that's exactly the story I'm hoping to tell with imagery. I've been trying to tell that same story for years, and my challenge is that you as soon as you say a third rail word or term or something, you're canceled by somebody else. One side's canceling the other side. And the hope for me is that these issues, and while my work, your work, can serve as springboards for now a larger conversation going forward. And we need conversation to come outside of the traditional media world. We see the sensationalism of Donald Trump. We see now that the networks MSNBC and CNN all made huge amounts of money on Trump. They're reporting in the Washington Post the other day saying, what are they going to do? They're all going to fall into some sort of, some sort of depression, because they particularly MSNBC, and I don't watch them because I don't have a TV, but I mean, I know what goes on there, and I've been a consumer of those things long enough. That's why I don't look at them anymore. But that they shape the narrative so much is why we have now everybody so polarized, because there's money in the polarization. And what doesn't get addressed is that most people, including Republicans, want a universal healthcare system.
Yes, they do.
Okay, probably close to 90% of Democrats, the last I saw polled, but the Democratic Party, I'm not saying that because I'm not registered with anything at this point, but the Democratic Party leadership says, no, we can't have that, because we have to, because some people, for some reason, like to pay a lot of money for bad service. But somehow, that I don't really know, but I mean, that's the answer. And so, yeah, there has to be something that comes up. And I think that what the protests in June sort of bore out is that, and what I'm using in my book, this title, The Unmasking of America, what's being shown here, what are we unmasking? And let's now look at it, because it almost took everybody down.
Yep.
This problem that you thought was just for sacrifice zones, what Chris Hedges calls sacrifice zones, where you just can offshore to the poor and cannibalize the poor as a business opportunity. Private equity companies and hedge funds. I mean, the things that private equity companies own nursing homes. I mean, it's like at some point you say, there's something terribly wrong with this setup. And, all through June, when I was documenting a lot of those protests, and I had people from outside the city, and they just assumed that they were about Trump. I said, no, they don't have the luxury to think about that. It's about their Democratic mayor and their Democratic governor and their police department, who are victimizing and torturing. And it went on last night at Stonewall. I mean, it's not just the Black community. It's anybody who speaks up against the power structure now is going to get their head beat in. And that's what New York City's become. Yeah,
and the struggle continues. It's and I know that's a catchphrase, but I'm being quite serious about it. It has to go on. We have to struggle no matter who the president is. We have a system that is built to, people get to be president because they defend the system. So our job is to protect ourselves from those people and from all those forces. If we don't, then everybody is going to continue suffering in this country. There won't be I'm glad sometimes I'm the age I am. There aren't many people left who can have a pension, who, first of all, have a full-time job with benefits, all these things, living wage work, all these things that people my age have and people a little younger. But to have this society that's built to exploit people, that's the goal, is to exploit people and to give them as little as possible. And that's something that has to be opposed. It has to be opposed with all our might. And with COVID, it's like we talk about things getting back to normal, getting back to the familiar. Well, it's never going to get back the way it was. There are jobs that are never going to come back. People working from home. Now they're saying, our employees are going to be home until next year because you can save money if you don't have to maintain a physical structure. But we weren't meant to work inside our living rooms or propping up a laptop on a kitchen table. It's not how we should be living. And the solution is a vaccine. I got my flu shot. I'm not against vaccines, but a friend of mine who works in the pharmaceutical industry told me they usually take 3 to 4 years to develop a vaccine. Now there's a vaccine that's going to be developed in a year, and I'm supposed to trust it. I'm supposed to trust these people. I don't trust otherwise. But yes, I want things to get back to normal. Yes, I want to be able to travel again. I don't want to avoid people. I didn't see my own family for months after March. And now I'm like, how do you have, holiday gatherings if there's a communicable disease and you're afraid? So yes, I want all of that to be resolved, but it's not going to be resolved quickly. All of the things that we've talked about that have been accelerating these last few decades are still with us. So there's going to be a new world. And unfortunately, having Biden in the White House instead of Trump is not going to make this new world what we need it to be.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, on that note, I'm hoping that people are going to buy your book because it's telling that story and telling really through history that people should. And again, it's a great gift. And then also, I'm going to make a pitch for my book, which is also a great gift. And if they want more of your writing, they could see it on the back of my book. So.
Yes.
So thanks, Margaret, and we will be in touch. And we're going to have lunch one day soon, maybe even brunch.
Yes, let's.
Okay, talk soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.